So I kind of got in me to do a short series on what I'll call the warrior's mindset. Now, it's certainly something that's a lot more dynamic than what I can probably give it justice to in a short series. But I hope I can give you some food for thought and some questions that we can continue to ask ourselves and continue our journey in how to hone this thing. So, call it what you will, warrior's mindset, fighter's mindset, combat mindset. It's really all the same thing. And at the end of the day, it's this reference for how we view the world and the actions that we take and understanding the motives behind those actions or the inactions, right? And so I appreciate you hanging out with me for a few minutes. I'm just going to sit here and drink my coffee. You'll notice I got quite a few stickers on this thing, and a lot of them are some fictional warriors. Leave a comment down below if you happen to see one that stands out to you a little bit more than another. And if you want to show your support to the channel, hit the like button, hit the subscribe, and hit that notification bell so we can keep the conversation rolling. If we break down what the warrior's mindset really is, we'll see that it really comes down to two things. And most of the time, we spend all of our time focusing on the second part. We got seminars and books and all kinds of things that teach skills or competencies, and that's what we promote. But I think that all of that really doesn't matter, no matter how good we are at doing something, if we haven't taken care of the first part first, or the first question, the first rule, or the first principle, however it is that you want to call it. And so what is that first rule or that first principle? It's really kind of easy, but it's complex all at the same time, and it's hard to pinpoint down to a single phrase or a single point. So I'm going to throw out a couple questions to you so we can try to hone in on this thing. And so the first rule, the first principle is, what do you really believe in? What do you value? What are your beliefs? What do you believe is more important than yourself? And for the warrior in us, it really comes down to a couple other things, digging in a little bit deeper, and it's, what do we stand for? What are we willing to take action for? And if necessary, what are we willing to give our lives for? That's what it really comes down to. And I want to tell you up front, I'm not an advocate for violence. I'm not a fan of war. It's part of my job and duty description, so that's how I have to train and live my life and train those who are in my charge. But it's not the whole story. There's a lot of ugly truths, that we learn in and through combat, and things that I've learned along the way. And if we don't apply those things to how we live and train and think and act in the world around us on a day-to-day basis, the consequences can be severe for us and for those around us. And so I ask these things of myself all the time. And I ask those who are in my charge these questions all the time. And I think it's really important that we have this conversation and ask ourselves right now in this moment some of these hard questions. So would you die for your family, whether it's your kids, your husband, your wife, your family, your mother, your father, whatever the case is, brothers and sisters? And I think all of us are probably going to give a resounding yes, without hesitation. You don't even have to ask. I will do so. I will stand up for them, and if necessary, I will give my life for them. And so I think, if we look at it a little bit closer, we can see that, this first rule is kind of rooted in a principle of selfless service or selflessness. Selfless service or selflessness, right? But at the same time, we really need to stop and peel back that onion a little bit more and look a little bit deeper at the layer of this. Would we stand up for somebody who's just a friend or an acquaintance, a co-worker? Would we stand up for the stranger that we don't know at all? Would we, digging a little deeper, would we stand up to such a degree, should the situation call for it, to the point that we would lay our lives down for it? Is that something that we believe in that much? That's really what the warrior's mindset comes down to. So what scenarios exist for us to instinctively take action right now to stop what's going on? But I got to tell you, it's really not all about violence and violence of action. Although we're called to be ready for these things, that's not what it really all comes down to. You know, one of the first Christian martyrs, his name was Stephen. And one day he was out. Some of y'all probably just clicked off. It's all good. But one day, he was out on the streets and he was preaching the good news. And the people picked up stones and they stoned him to death. They executed him on the spot. But I think if we look at Stephen's actions, we can see the warrior's mindset and the fighter mentality in him, even though what he was doing was not violence at all. He believed that there was something that was greater than himself, and that belief propelled him and caused him to take action. In this case, it was just saying words out of his mouth. But he knew doing so right off the bat. He knew what the consequences of his actions might be, but he believed so much in his belief that he was willing to accept those consequences. And that's really so important, because how we answer these first series of questions to get our hands and minds and hearts around the first rule or the first principle dictates kind of how we move into the second rule or the second principle of how we are living our actions and our beliefs and putting them into motion. Because if what is really driving us is self and ego and pride and propping ourselves up and making ourselves look good, in my opinion, in my beliefs, none of anything matters, no matter how good you are. Because we see it all the time throughout history. People who were really good at war or in violence of action, but their beliefs and their values are not something that we want to uphold or embody in our lives. Because if we look at people like Hitler, like Genghis Khan, any of the Caesars, and really any terrorist organization, they're all really good at what they do, and they all have a belief that propels them and drives them to action. It's just that these aren't beliefs that I think or believe that we should be emulating. But if we compare them to people like Gandhi or William Wallace, Susan B. Anthony, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Martin Luther King Jr., Alvin York, who was a pacifist but was so renowned in combat that he was awarded the Medal of Honor, or even, the unknown Tiananmen tank man who had the audacity to stand in the streets in front of tanks, man. How crazy is that? But they were all pushed and propelled and driven by their beliefs that something was greater than themselves, and that something that was greater than themselves was community, it was human values and civil rights and things of this nature, and that's what drove them to action. And most of the time in these people, some of them, were caused to violence of action and some were not, but they all shared a similar common ethic or value. And so you really have to find, what do you believe is the answer to that rule or principle of number one? What is it that you believe in? What is it that you value? What is it that you are willing to stand up for regardless of the consequences? And for the warrior, it's going to come down to a few overarching topics like how to move, how to communicate, of course, how to fight, how to defend, and how to protect. And so once we have the knowledge and the skills in these areas and we are presented with a challenging event, we can move so and do so without hesitation. We can stand up for what we believe in. And we can hone our skills to such a degree that we are acting out of what's called muscle memory. That is, we are so trained and we are so proficient at what we are trying to do that we don't have to think about it and we can just do it. And we can do so with such a violence of action that we can overwhelm our enemy. Because again, it's not always going to come down to what are you willing to give your life for? What are you willing to lay down your life? Because these are worst case scenarios, but odds are on a day-to-day basis, we're presented with things that cause us and demand our action. Maybe you're at school and you see a fellow student who's being bullied. Are you willing to stand up for that person? Even if it means that you may be ostracized from the rest of your classmates. Maybe you're at work and somebody's spreading rumors or lies. Are you willing to stand up and raise your voice for what is right? Or maybe you're walking down the street and you see that somebody's being assaulted. Are you going to stand up? Are you going to run towards it? Or are you just going to run away? Are you going to locate, close with, and destroy and neutralize that enemy if that's what it takes? What if the attacker has a knife? Are you willing to get cut? Because in a knife fight, somebody's going to get cut. What if it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you hear a window break out in your living room? You hear the door being busted open. What are you going to do? And so the warrior aligns their values and their beliefs and their morals and their ethics with their actions. They put these things into motion in what they do. They stand up for what they believe in, regardless of the consequences. They are ready to locate and to close with and destroy or neutralize the enemy, regardless of the cost, because they know that something is bigger than themselves and that requires their action, because you can't live right with yourself if you don't take action. So I know this was kind of an overarching, look at this first rule or this first principle of the warrior's mindset of knowing what is within us and understanding it a little bit deeper. And, maybe it's a little bit more philosophical in approach. So in a few upcoming videos continuing in this series, we'll look at a little bit more practical approaches to understanding our mindset and how we can train to live and to move and to operate in the world around us. And then we'll look at a couple of skills and competencies that the warrior really needs to learn how to hone so that they can master their craft and continue to be authentic in who they are and how they live. So if you like the content of the video or the channel, again, make sure you hit the like and the subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date. Most importantly though, leave a comment down below and let me know what you think and what your beliefs are on the warrior's mindset and what we had to talk about, and so we can continue on this conversation. And until then, as always, man, we will see you